Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm looking at the moments where amusement park excitement went completely off the rails in front of rolling cameras. From a woman who forced her way onto a roller coaster after being told she couldn't ride, to a bride-to-be whose final outing before her wedding ended with a ride collapsing midair. It was July 19th, 2013, at a busy amusement park in Germany, and the summer crowd had been filling the walkways since the gates opened that morning. Brenke Keller was 49 years old and worked as a school cleaner. She had never married and had always preferred living alone until a few months earlier, when a serious accident had forced her to move in with her older sister while she recovered. The accident had happened at a child's birthday party in a public park. Brenke had been drinking before she arrived and had noticed a small trampoline set up for the children. A sign beside it displayed the age and weight limits clearly. Brenke weighed approximately 282 pounds, well above what the trampoline was built to handle. The parents of the children told her not to get on it. She got on it anyway. After only a few jumps, the frame gave way beneath her and she fell awkwardly onto the hard ground below. She suffered several broken bones and spent weeks in hospital, followed by months of recovery. Doctors told her she was fortunate to be alive. Her older sister had spent those months caring for her and hoping the experience had shifted something in the way Brenke made decisions. I think the people who love us most often know exactly what we need to hear and have learned through experience that saying it changes nothing. And what happens next proves that. On the morning of July 19th, Brenke told her sister she wanted to get out of the house and enjoy the fresh air. Her sister suggested a quiet walk or lunch together. Brenke chose the amusement park. She spent the first part of the morning walking the grounds, watching rides and stopping for a drink before making her way toward one of the park's largest roller coasters. The ride had a steep initial drop and ran at high speed through a series of tight turns. Her sister chose to wait near the exit, taking out her phone to record what she expected would be Brenke's ride. Brenke joined the boarding queue and waited. When she reached the front, the ride operator checked each passenger before allowing them into the seat. When he reached Brenke, he explained that the lap restraint could not close safely around her and that she was not able to board. The refusal was direct and the reason was clear. Here's something I want to say to anyone watching this. A refusal at a boarding gate is not a judgment about who you are. It's an engineer somewhere telling you that this specific machine was not built for this specific situation. Those are different things, and ignoring them can be genuinely dangerous. The operator had only recently started at the park. A few moments after turning Brenke away, another guest nearby needed assistance and his attention shifted to the other end of the boarding platform. In that window, Brenke moved into the boarding area and sat down in an empty seat before staff noticed she had bypassed the check. Another ride attendant, believing the restraint check had already been completed and seeing the lap bar in what appeared to be a secure position, gave the signal for dispatch. By the time the first operator looked back, the train had already left the station. The restraint that had not closed properly offered limited resistance through the initial flat section of the ride. As the train went over the first steep drop, the forces generated by the descent were enough to shift Brenke's body against the restraint beyond what it could hold. She was ejected from the seat as the train reached the bottom of the first drop, where the forces on the body are at their highest. The restraint could no longer hold her at that speed, and she was thrown completely from the car. She fell approximately 30 feet and landed on the concrete pathway below. The impact concentrated across her head and upper spine. She was motionless before the train had completed the next turn. Her sister was still recording as the train disappeared down the track before realizing something had gone terribly wrong. People in the area below called emergency services immediately, and park staff reached the scene within minutes, followed by paramedics. The injuries were unsurvivable. Brenke Keller was pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators reviewed the video recorded by Brenke's sister alongside CCTV footage from the boarding station, examined the restraint system, and interviewed operators and witnesses. Together, the recordings confirmed that Brenke had boarded after being refused. There was no mechanical failure. The roller coaster was closed during the investigation. The park later introduced stricter screening at the boarding gate and additional restraint checks before departure. Her sister had suggested a quiet walk or lunch. That was the whole alternative on the table that morning. I keep coming back to how small the other option was. Brenke had already been told no once by the operator and found a way around it anyway. What happened in the Netherlands involved someone who was also told no that day, and the person who said it was standing right beside him. It was August 21st, 2016, on a warm afternoon at a busy amusement park in the Netherlands, and the park had been at full capacity since mid-morning. Colvin Cooper was 29 years old and worked as a freelance photographer, spending most of his time creating content for his social media pages. He filmed fast rides, loud attractions, and anything he thought people would watch. Earlier that day, he had already recorded several clips around the park and was planning to post them that evening. That morning, he had met Delcy for their first date. They had been talking online for a few weeks. Delcy had suggested a quiet lunch somewhere. Colvin had insisted on the amusement park and told her it would be a first date they would never forget. Delcy was not comfortable with big rides, but agreed. If someone tells you on a first date what they're not comfortable with, that's not a barrier to work around. That's information about who they are. The fact that Delcy still showed up and tried to have a good time says more about her than anything else in this story. From the moment they walked in, Colvin made every decision. He chose the games, chose the rides, and handed Delcy his phone whenever he wanted something filmed. She spent most of the day behind the camera while he performed for it. By the afternoon, she had barely been asked a single question about herself. When they reached one of the park's largest roller coasters, Delcy said she did not want to ride. She told him large coasters frightened her and that she would rather wait outside. Colvin dismissed her concerns, handed her his phone, asked her to record him boarding, and walked into the queue alone. Inside the ride control room, an operator had been called in to cover an extra shift he had not been scheduled for. He was unhappy about it, but came in after his manager told him the park needed the cover. During operations, the lead train came to a stop after the control system detected an earlier issue on the course and held it in a brake section as a precaution. Before the track had been properly confirmed clear, the operator manually restarted the following train, overriding the normal block protection that would usually prevent another train from entering the same section of track. Colvin waved toward Delcy's camera as his train left the platform. The train accelerated through the course normally before approaching the occupied brake section ahead. With the lead train still stopped on the track, there was no time to prevent the collision. The following train struck the stationary train at speed. The impact was immediate and violent. Riders were thrown hard against their restraints as the two trains collided. Colvin sustained catastrophic injuries to his head and chest, his body driven forward into the restraint bar before snapping back as the train came to an abrupt stop. Several other passengers across both trains suffered serious injuries, some of which left them with permanent disabilities. People across the park heard the impact. Staff called emergency services immediately, and paramedics, firefighters, and police arrived within minutes. Injured riders were treated at the scene and transported to nearby hospitals. Despite the efforts of responders, Colvin died from his injuries. Delcy was still standing near the entrance holding his phone when the emergency vehicles arrived. The last footage on it was Colvin waving from his seat as the train pulled out of the station. Investigators found the ride was restarted before the track was confirmed clear. CCTV confirmed that a manual override and operator error allowed the second train into an occupied train section. They concluded poor management contributed to the crash. They paid for damages and introduced new operating procedures and additional safety checks to prevent two trains from occupying the same section of track simultaneously. Delcy spent her first date holding a camera and watching emergency vehicles arrive. She had said she did not want to be there for any of this. She had said so out loud. I think about her standing there with that phone for a long time. The next story is different. Two best friends went into the park just to have fun, but one ended up in the back of a paramedic. It was October 15th, 2020, and the afternoon was cool at a busy amusement park in Sweden. Families filled the park, children laughed, and long lines stretched outside the most popular rides. Stellan Bergman was 28 years old and worked as an IT support technician for a software company in Stockholm. He had never married and enjoyed spending his free time with family and close friends. His best friend, Gustav Holm, had known him since high school. Even though their lives had become busy over the years, they always planned a short trip together every few months. Gustav had recently started making short videos for social media, and Stellan was always happy to appear in them because he enjoyed making people laugh. Trust me, this kind of relationship is rare, and it's something I noticed immediately. The two friends had planned the trip to the amusement park for several weeks. Gustav wanted to record every exciting ride they tried that day for his social media page. By the afternoon, they had already filmed several attractions and were laughing as they watched the videos together. Stellan joked that the River Rapids ride would probably be the funniest because one of them would end up completely soaked. I've had that exact conversation with friends at water rides. That kind of ordinary moment before something extraordinary happens is the thing that stays with me longest in these cases. When they reached the attraction, Gustav took out his action camera and asked Stellan if he could film the whole ride from inside the raft. Stellan agreed without thinking twice. They climbed into the raft together, fastened their seatbelts, and the ride began. The raft floated through the course without any problems. Gustav held the camera while the two friends laughed each time water splashed into the raft. As the ride came to an end, the raft entered the unloading area where a conveyor system was supposed to carry it safely to the exit. Instead, the conveyor system failed to operate correctly. Their raft became trapped on the moving belt, while a sensor failed to detect the obstruction, allowing another raft to be released into the unloading area behind them. With nowhere to go, the second raft crashed into their raft with tremendous force. The impact of the collision tipped their raft sharply to one side. Stellan was thrown hard onto the moving conveyor system beneath his raft. His body struck the metal surface of the machinery. Gustav was thrown into the water beside the ride platform. Ride operators immediately pressed the emergency stop button, but the conveyor system could not stop fast enough. Stellan's body continued moving across the machinery, and his chest and legs were caught beneath the moving belt. His ribs fractured, and his internal organs were crushed. He suffered massive internal bleeding and severe trauma to his torso. Gustav managed to swim to the side, where park staff quickly pulled him to safety. He suffered only minor injuries and shock from the incident. People waiting to board the ride screamed as park staff rushed toward the conveyor. Emergency services were called immediately. Paramedics arrived within minutes and carefully removed Stellan from the machinery before taking both men to a nearby hospital. Despite the efforts of doctors and emergency surgery, Stellan's injuries were too severe. He died from internal bleeding and organ damage 6 hours after arriving at the hospital. Because Gustav had been filming throughout the ride, the entire accident was caught on camera. Gustav later handed the action camera to investigators, and the footage became an important part of the investigation. Gustav spent that whole day behind a camera making memories, and ended up handing the footage to investigators. I don't know how you process that. I genuinely don't. Investigators found that a malfunction in the conveyor system had caused the first raft to become trapped, and that safety systems designed to stop another raft from entering were inadequate. The attraction remained closed while engineers examined the ride. Stellan's family later filed a civil lawsuit against the park, alleging negligence in the ride's operation and safety systems. The park also introduced additional safety measures before the attraction reopened. Up next, a woman who wasn't even planning to ride. She was still deciding whether to get on when tragedy struck. It was June 18th, 2022, and the afternoon was bright at a busy amusement park near Helsinki, Finland. Families filled the park, and long lines stretched outside the most popular rides. Petra Virtanen was 42 years old and worked as a cashier at a retail store. Just a year earlier, her life had looked very different. She had owned a small gift shop that she had spent many years building from the ground up. The business meant everything to her. Then her husband became involved in a public financial scandal. Even though Petra was never accused of doing anything wrong, customers stopped coming, bills piled up, and she was forced to close the shop. Soon after, their marriage ended in divorce. Losing both her business and her marriage left her heartbroken. She moved into a small apartment and started over with a cashier's job just to keep paying her bills. For months, Petra hardly left home unless she was going to work. Her younger sister worried about her and often asked her to come outside and enjoy life again. On the morning of June 18th, Petra finally decided to do something different. She told her sister she was going to spend the day at the amusement park because she wanted fresh air and hoped it would help take her mind off everything that had happened. I've had days where getting outside felt like the biggest decision of the week. Reading that she finally made it out after months of staying home, I felt that. Petra spent the afternoon walking around the park. She watched families enjoying the rides as children ran past carrying balloons and stuffed toys. She played a few carnival games but did not win anything. This small detail tells me she wasn't trying to have a perfect day. She was just trying to have a day. There's a difference, and it matters. Later in the afternoon, she walked toward the Arctic Vortex roller coaster. She had not decided whether she wanted to ride. The line was long, so she stood in the queue watching the trains race past overhead while she waited. As one of the roller coaster trains sped over the queue, traveling at approximately 45 miles per hour, a metal bracket suddenly detached from one of the train's cars. The heavy piece of metal weighing nearly 8 pounds flew through the air and struck Petra directly in the back of the head. The impact was severe and immediate. She collapsed to the ground without uttering a sound. A visitor recording the roller coaster appeared to capture the moments immediately before and after the impact as shocked screams echoed through the queue. Blood pooled beneath her on the ground. Park staff ran toward her immediately. I want to say something about that. Nobody who pointed a phone at that ride that afternoon was prepared for what ended up on it. That is a weight that doesn't go away quickly. People nearby screamed and rushed to help her. Park staff immediately stopped the ride, safely evacuated the remaining passengers, and secured the area. Emergency services were called right away. Paramedics arrived within minutes, assessed Petra's severe head injuries, and rushed her to a nearby hospital with life-threatening trauma. Police and ride safety investigators secured the scene, photographed the damaged train, collected the detached bracket, inspected the remaining coaster trains, and reviewed maintenance records. Despite emergency surgery and the best efforts of doctors, Petra died at the hospital later that evening from massive brain injury and internal bleeding caused by the impact. The investigation found that the bracket had detached after a fatigue crack developed in part of the train's fastening assembly. Investigators concluded that the crack had grown over time and had not been detected during routine inspections. Following the investigation, the roller coaster was permanently closed and later dismantled. Petra's family also pursued legal action against the park, alleging failures in inspection and maintenance. Now for the next story, the victim wasn't a guest at all. He was a maintenance technician whose job was to keep the ride safe for everyone else. It was April 18th, 2017, and the morning was cool at an amusement park in Rust, Germany. The park was still closed to visitors as maintenance crews prepared several rides before opening for the day. Werner Stolz was 45 years old and had worked as a maintenance technician at the park for almost 15 years. He was married and had 2 children. Every morning he left home before sunrise so he could help make sure the rides were safe before thousands of guests arrived. He was known as a quiet and dependable worker who rarely took a day off. His daughter had recently been accepted into university, and Werner had been working extra shifts to help pay for her education. That is a very specific kind of love that doesn't announce itself. It just shows up early and keeps going. His wife often told him not to overwork himself, but he always said his family came first. Werner enjoyed fixing machines and had spent most of his adult life working with heavy equipment. New employees often asked him for advice because of his experience. He believed every repair should be done carefully and never liked leaving a job unfinished. Experience at that level builds a kind of quiet confidence that I think is genuinely valuable, and also, sometimes, the thing that makes a person slightly less cautious than they should be in one particular moment. On the morning of April 18th, Werner and several coworkers were assigned to carry out scheduled maintenance on one of the park's roller coasters while it was closed to guests. Their job was to inspect parts of the lift chain and drive system before the ride opened later that day. The procedures required that all stored mechanical energy in the system be properly released and isolated before any technician touched the machinery. As Werner leaned in to inspect the lift chain, he positioned his right hand near the drive mechanism to examine one of the chain components more closely. Unknown to the maintenance crew, stored mechanical energy had not been fully released from the system. Moments later, the drive mechanism suddenly engaged without warning. His right hand was caught between the moving chain and a metal gear before he could pull away. The machinery dragged his arm deeper into the mechanism until his coworkers reached the emergency stop button and shut the system down. His hand and forearm were crushed between the moving parts, causing multiple fractures and severe soft tissue injuries. His coworkers immediately called emergency services, while others worked carefully to free him from the machinery without causing further injury. Paramedics arrived within minutes, treated him at the scene, and rushed him to a nearby hospital. Despite emergency surgery, doctors were unable to stop the catastrophic blood loss and complications caused by the crush injuries, and Werner died from his injuries. What hurts me most here is that he came in early to make sure strangers could ride safely, and the system failed around him. Investigators focused on whether all required lockout and energy isolation procedures had been properly completed before maintenance work started. The incident was captured by the ride's maintenance CCTV system, and investigators later reviewed the footage alongside maintenance records and witness statements. As a precaution, the park temporarily suspended maintenance work on the ride, while comprehensive safety inspections were carried out. After the investigation, the park reviewed its employee training, maintenance procedures, and energy isolation protocols to reduce the risk of similar workplace accidents. Werner never returned home after what began as a routine morning at work. His wife and 2 children were left to remember the man who had spent years making sure strangers could enjoy the park safely. The ride eventually returned to service, but for his family, that morning never truly ended. Werner went to work before sunrise to make rides safe for families like Milada and Tomasz. A few weeks before their wedding, they took a day off from planning just to breathe. I didn't want to include what happened next. I genuinely considered leaving this one out. It was May 21st, 2021, and the afternoon was sunny at an adventure park near Brno, Czech Republic. Visitors moved between attractions as ride operators kept the busiest rides running throughout the afternoon. Milada Vondrakova was 28 years old and worked as a florist. She loved flowers and had dreamed of opening her own flower shop one day. She was engaged to Tomáš Horáček, and the two were only a few weeks away from their wedding. For months, they had been meeting with vendors, choosing decorations, tasting cakes, and trying to stay within their budget. Milada wanted everything to be perfect, but planning the wedding while working full-time had left her exhausted. Tomáš noticed she had been smiling less and worrying more as the wedding day got closer. A few days before the wedding, Milada suggested they take a break from the planning and spend the day at the adventure park. Tomáš agreed, hoping it would help them relax before the wedding. The couple arrived at the park shortly after lunch. They spent hours walking around, playing games, eating snacks, and riding smaller attractions. Tomáš even won Milada a stuffed bear at one of the game stalls. She carried it with her as they continued exploring the park. I don't know why that specific image hit me harder than anything else in this story, but it did, and I haven't been able to shake it. They took photos together and talked about where they wanted to spend their honeymoon. As they continued exploring, they noticed one of the park's biggest rides temporarily closed while maintenance staff worked nearby. It reopened later that afternoon, and with everything appearing normal, visitors quickly returned. When the couple reached the attraction, they decided to join the line. The ride started normally. The giant arm swung higher and higher while the gondola rotated at full speed. As it completed one of its early swings, a brief metallic clunk echoed through the structure. Milada glanced at Tomáš and asked if he had heard it. He looked around, but with the ride continuing to operate normally and everyone else enjoying the attraction, he assumed it was nothing unusual. Moments later, as the ride reached its highest point, one of the main support components suddenly failed catastrophically. A critical weld joint in the upper support arm fractured and gave way completely. The rotating gondola broke away from its mounting brackets and crashed downward. The metal structure fell approximately 50 feet before impacting the ground at high velocity. The force of the impact was devastating. Milada was thrown violently against the metal frame of her seat. Her body struck the restraint bar and the side of the gondola cabin. She suffered massive trauma to her chest, spine, and head. Tomáš was thrown in a different direction, and his body collided with multiple metal surfaces as the gondola twisted during the fall. The ride's rotating motion caused additional injury as bodies were flung inside the collapsing structure. Metal twisted and bent as riders were crushed between structural components. The gondola came to rest on its side on the ground. People nearby screamed and ran for safety as park staff rushed toward the ride. The entire incident was captured on the park's CCTV cameras and on video by several visitors who had been recording moments before the collapse. Park staff immediately activated emergency procedures. Paramedics, firefighters, and police arrived within minutes. Emergency crews worked quickly to reach the injured riders trapped inside the damaged gondola. Milada suffered catastrophic injuries including severe head trauma, multiple rib fractures, spinal injuries, and massive internal bleeding. Despite emergency medical efforts and immediate transport to a nearby hospital, she died from her injuries within hours. Tomáš survived with serious injuries including broken bones and internal trauma and was treated at a hospital for several weeks. However, he came home without her. There are some endings in these cases that I read once and then have to step away from. This is one of them. Investigators examined the ride's maintenance records, CCTV footage, and videos recorded by visitors. They concluded that the collapse happened after a critical weld joint in the support arm failed while the ride was operating at full speed. Milada was the only fatality, while several other riders suffered serious injuries. The adventure park closed immediately following the incident. The ride was permanently dismantled and removed from the park. The park implemented new maintenance protocols, hired additional safety inspectors, and created an independent safety review board. Criminal charges were filed against park management for negligent maintenance and failure to conduct proper structural inspections.